Christine Donegan unfortunately could not be here in person to accept this tremendous honour, but I'm very pleased to share her remarks with you tonight. Victor Hugo wrote to his son from Waterloo, where he's doing some final research for Les Miserables. I will say no more than a word on the subject of my book, and then he went on to devote nearly 50 pages to it. This word of thanks, I promise, will be brief. I'm sorry not to be able to accept this tremendously generous award in person, but I can assure you there is a much appreciated honour, for which I'm extremely grateful to the French American Foundation and to the jury. It is a real privilege to translate this great crusading novel, and indebted to Adam Freudenheim for having commissioned me to do so. Translation gives you the opportunity to read the text very closely, and working Les Miserables was an endlessly rewarding experience. Tracking down Hugo's references with the invaluable help of the internet was a stupendous voyage of all kinds of discoveries on subjects ranging from the development of sign language and the invention of the stethoscope to the intricacies of 18th century hairstyles and the horses that Napoleon rode. Apparently, Dostoevsky was quite happy to spend a few days in prison in 1874 for a censorship violation, as I gave him the opportunity to reread Les Miserables and to refresh his wonderful impressions of that great book. Without wishing imprisonment on anyone, I hope that this new translation will find new readers with a magnificent work. As Graham Rowe, his biographer, has written, it's impossible to be the same person after reading it. Thank you.
Now, please join me in welcoming Linda Asher. Linda is a translator and has been a member of the jury of the Translation Prize for more than a decade. She is also a longtime fiction editor at The New Yorker. She has translated work by Milena Kundera, Restif de la Bretonne, Victor Hugo, Honoré de Balzac, Georges Simenon, Jean-Pierre Vernant, and others. She is a two-time winner of the Translation Prize and a Chevalier of the Order of Arts and Letters of the French government.
Over the decade and more I've read for this jury, hundreds of interesting, powerful, provocative works have come to our attention. Of the uncountable number of valuable works published each year in the French language, only a very embarrassingly few books are translated and published in English, and fewer yet are submitted for consideration by this jury. Happily, with the arrival of technology for less costly printing and distribution, we can observe now that alongside the older stalwarts, several smaller houses seem to be springing into existence, and many of them take international publishing seriously as a major source of their and our interest. We and you, the readers, can see evidence of this phenomenon in the occasional advertising and much online activity that reflects readers we didn't even know about reading this stuff. We at the Foundation do seek out and solicit submissions of candidate books from all such sources, and we welcome information that can broaden our award process. We congratulate, meanwhile, and thank all these publishers for their enterprise and their economic courage for printing and evangelizing the books that America sees. The array of candidates for consideration this year has been rich and various, so various, in fact, that the choice was difficult, and we settled on two quite different nonfiction books to share the prize. This has happened a few times in the past, and we're always pleased to be able to publicize a list of finalists as well as the ultimate prize winners. This year we've chosen a math book and a history book, both of them of some resounding effect in France, and we hope these awards for the fine translations will help broadcast them here as well. This year's chosen books are Cédric Villani's Birth of a Theorem in English and Patrice Guénifé's Bonaparte. Sorry, there's a lot of mechanism here. Thank you. Cédric, this is called the Birth of a Theorem. It's a work about mathematical research and discovery. Cédric Villani has given us a kind of transcribed theater in this book, a narrative of the thinking that brought him to his solution of a decades-old problem, and thence to his capture of the highly significant Fields Medal in mathematics in 2010. Villani is an exhilarating account of a mathematician's adventure in braiding together ideas, historical and current ideas, of possibility and probability, ideas called up, set aside, and pulled up again. Much of this process is carried out before us in dense or playful conversation with colleagues and probably rivals, so that it's often dialogue that carries us through the fates and starts of this approach to a solution of the ring of victory. Translating this text required unusual background capacity, ingenuity, and high articulation, qualities that Malcolm Debevoise has provided in many works before this. The author Villani says of this man's work that it required a lot of courage, patience, and skill, since the challenges were lurking at any corner in the style and multiplicity of tones, the presentation of mathematics, the rendering of feelings, the cultural references, and so on. Malcolm did a heroic job. Publishers Farrar, Straus, and Giroux to be thanked for this delightful publication with translator Malcolm Debevoise. And here's, at some length I have to say about it, but very rich, Malcolm Debevoise's own remarks in response to the notification of the prize. The prospect of translating Théorème Vivant was irresistible. Nothing remotely like it had ever been attempted. Cédric Villani's book breaks every rule there is for popular scientific writing, not least Hawking's famous law of publishing, that every mathematical equation reduces the potential readership by half. If that were true, sales of this book, which has 1 or 2 or 3 or more equations on almost every page, should have been vanishingly small. Instead, it was a hit in France, and even more surprisingly, perhaps, a hit in the UK as well. Until Cedric came along, the phenomenon of Landau damping, hang on to that term, you'll find it's useful in everyday life, was one of the most intractable enigmas in modern mathematical physics. Indeed, few professional mathematicians who are not specialists in this area will be able to make sense of the symbolism that covers this book, like a fantastically Baroque form of wallpaper. And yet, for mathematicians, as for general readers with little or no technical background, it is the coloring and the pattern and the texture of the paper that are important. The atmosphere it creates simply by being on the walls, not the fine detail. No one is expected to look very closely. No one, that is, except the translator. The problem with translating nonfiction, I've found, is that you actually have to know something about what you are translating. In this case, the problem was raised to something like its highest degree of difficulty. As it happens, I do have a certain training in mathematics, but it turned out to be just the wrong kind, mathematical logic for the most part, set theory, Gödel's incompleteness theorems, the continuum hypothesis, with a bit of number theory and topology thrown in, but nothing much in the way of complex analysis or combinatorics. As for statistical mechanics and plasma physics, well, not so much of that either. So I had my work cut out for me, no two ways about it. And yet, quite amazingly, the math turned out to be almost the least of this book's challenges. In many places, it was more difficult to faithfully reproduce in English the alternating registers of a narrative that was conceived primarily as an exercise in literary imagination, not as a mere diary, and still less as a treatise, however much potted scientific biography may have been included in order to help the reader follow the story. Because Cedric's book is first and foremost a story of everyday life. The hardest parts to get right, I found, were the dream sequences, the emails, the songs, the music that he listened to over and over again, desperately searching for inspiration, working late into the night of yet another day that seemed to have frustrated all hopes of success. But since life is harder than mathematics, this should hardly have come as a surprise. Birth of a Theorem is a truly wonderful book, and I do urge you all to read it and tell your friends about it. This is still of the translator. Only in the United States has it failed so far to find an audience, and this despite a triumphant cross-country author tour last spring. With luck, the paperback edition, just out 3 weeks ago, will give it a new and better life here. In the meantime, Cedric has gone on to do something almost no one else would have dared to do. On winning the Fields Medal in though he was still at or near the height of his remarkable powers, he agreed to devote the next 10 years of his life as director of the Institut Henri Poincaré in Paris to promoting and improving mathematical education throughout the world, on every continent, in rich and poor countries alike. One can be sure that there's another extraordinary tale to be told, and that when the time comes, he will tell it, again in an utterly novel and charming way. Let me say in closing how grateful I am to Cedric Villani for his constant encouragement, and to the French American Foundation and the Florence School Foundation for their continuing support. Thank you very much. Malcolm Devereux. Representative from Bauer Strauss. Receive this certificate. Thank you so much. That bill says that Patty Smith wrote this bill. Who thought to send it?
I think that was it's.
I see. Yeah. I see. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Stephen Weil. I work at Bauer Strauss and Giroux, the U.S. publisher for the Theorem. I'm the one who helped to organize that cross-country tour that was mentioned in Malcolm's remarks. Sadly, Malcolm wasn't able to be here tonight, but I'm happy to accept on his behalf. This book is just such an unconventional book in many ways. At its heart, it tells the behind-the-scenes story of a long journey to scientific discovery, but it's filled with such rich digressions, difficult technical language, snippets of dream fragments, song lyrics, email correspondence, and many, many equations. But it all adds up to kind of a singular presentation of the interior world of a truly unique individual, which is Cedric Villani. Which is all just to say that I can't imagine this was an easy book to translate. But needless to say, Malcolm did an absolutely impeccable job. So, on behalf of FFSG, but also Malcolm and Cedric, thank you to the French American Foundation and the Florence School Foundation for recognizing his work, and also, for recognizing the essential work of translation here at the end. So, thank you.
Other winner is the book Bonaparte by Guénic. Historian Patrice Guénic, long renowned for his work on the French Revolution, has, at the urging of colleagues, taken up the life of Napoleon Bonaparte. Still called Bonaparte then. The result is this comprehensive, rich, detailed, freshly considered account of the man, of this particular figure, giant figure, with his small and large history. The book has captivated a nation and a world endlessly intrigued by the story of this man's acts, his characters, his appetites, his huge will, his strategic capacity, and its consonance with developments seized and formed to his image. This first of a two-volume biography recounts the life up to 1802, through the Italian campaign that ousted Austria and brought the revolution to northern Italy, the Egyptian expedition, the return to France, and it closes with Bonaparte's political seizure of the position of first consul in 1802. The masterly work is published by Belknap Press, Harvard, and it offers an additional treasure like the Misérables in a long notes session, which on its own is worthy of a reader several additional nights of immersion. Translator Stephen Rendall will tell us about his engagement with this masterwork.
I did prepare a few remarks that are not really about this particular book. But the main thing is I think I need to change my tentative title, which will now be Great Minds and Not So Great Minds Also Think Alike. And you will soon see why this change of title is necessary. Translators often talk about how hard they work and how little their labor is appreciated. It is true that translation requires more effort than many people think, and that its rewards in terms of both prestige and remuneration are relatively slim. Prizes like this one are few and far between. But we should not forget that translation also is, or at least can be, a lot of fun. So on this occasion, I'd like to talk about a few of the many pleasures it provides. I will begin with a relatively minor pleasure, that of problem solving. Here the crossword puzzle might serve as a useful example. The crossword clues correspond, of course, to the translator's original text, and the puzzle solver's task consists in finding another way to say the same thing. It is a convention of the crossword puzzle that the correspondence between the clue and the answer is seldom straightforward. A cone maker is not a purveyor of ice cream or a manufacturer of traffic barriers, but of fur, F-I-R. And a place to put bags is a teapot. Doing crossword puzzles and translating both require a kind of linguistic double-jointedness. One has to be able to set aside the obvious solution, in the case of translations, is often the cognitive, and consider alternatives. And just as in doing a crossword puzzle, one sometimes has to go back and erase what seemed like a perfectly good answer because it doesn't fit with other parts of the puzzle. The translator sometimes has to change what he has written to make it cohere with later parts of the text. But these difficulties simply increase the pleasure taken in finally finding a satisfactory solution to the problem. A second pleasure might be called ventriloquism. The translator has the strange but frequently exhilarating feeling that a foreign voice is speaking through him or her. I first experienced this intensely years ago when I was translating the first volume of Honoré Durfey's 17th century pastoral romance, Les Crêpes. Durfey's text consists of highly mannered, even precious prose punctuated by sonnets, madrigals, and villanelle, and it was thrilling to find myself speaking, or rather writing, a language and using poetic forms so alien to me. Of course, texts vary in the extent to which they offer such experiences, but in every case, translators have to find a voice that differs in some respects from the ones they normally use. And that, too, is one of the pleasures of translation, expanding one's own repertoire. A third pleasure of translation is writing without the burden of invention. By this I mean that the translator does not need to find or invent, as the ancient rhetoricians called it, a subject, something to say. He has only to find a way to say in another language something that has already been said. And translators are not responsible for the truth of what they say, only for its formal correspondence to the original. Thus, translation could be seen as the paradise of pure writing, pure style, a paradise about which modern writers have dreamed ever since Flaubert. Fourth, for translators who are, like me, somewhat bulimic and foolishly willing to try almost anything, there is the pleasure of learning about a field of which they previously knew next to nothing. In my case, immunology, medieval music theory, women in Islam, Jewish historiography, or the history of Asia Minor in antiquity, and, I should probably add, Napoleon Bonaparte. Few other lines of work offer this kind of mad variety, which wards off the boredom of trades for many trades. Finally, there is the very important subject of cooperation. One of the advantages of translating a contemporary work is the opportunity to work with the author, in this case, Patrice Gunifet, a leading expert on the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Empire, who was very helpful in answering my questions, proposing solutions to translational problems, and generally being very supportive. In my experience, authors are generally very interesting people who are eager to help make the translation of their work as good as it can be, and working with them toward that goal is a genuine delight. But translation, like other kinds of writing, also involves interaction with the editors who choose and devise and negotiate with translators, and with the copy editors whose contributions are, again in my experience, invaluable. But they invariably receive even less recognition than translators. Their names never appear on the title page. And so in conclusion, I would like to thank not only the French American Foundation, but also all those who helped me win this honor. Last but not least, my wife, Lisa Neal, who read and corrected the whole translation and saved me from many egregious errors. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I think a lot of it is arranged for a few more drinks behind us, so let's all go there and raise a glass to the translators, those who won and those who tried. Everything is fantastic. Myself, I'm using the birth of the theorem as interspersing this with Flaubert, and this has been quite a challenge on both sides. Thank you all for coming. Please enjoy the drinks.